Hello, everybody, and welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, episode for April 2019. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm joined by Marlene Royle.
Hello, everybody.
Now, before we kick off, a quick word from our sponsors. Rowing Tours is a new rowing holiday vacation company headed by Olympian Pete Wells. You can join the Row Tours team in a mini vacation ahead of the World Rowing Championships this summer. You can choose from a 3, 4, or 6-day rowing tour down the Danube River, starting in the town of Passau and ending at Linz, which is where the World Championships are being held. They also have options for non-rowing people. You can take a bicycle and you can climb the high Alps in the Austrian Alps and circuit all sorts of extremely hard, high, tough peaks. I will say that they have the different days tours, including a low budget, high fitness package for those of you where you'll row 50 kilometers a day for 2 days. The cycling package includes the Kitzbühel, the Edelweiss, and the Hinterglemm summits. Personally, scares the hell out of me, but I hope that a whole load of you go check it out. Pete's website is rowtours.com/rowing-chat. And remember, supporting our sponsors helps us pay for the costs that bring this show to you. The other sponsor is Will Ruth. You probably all know Will. He hosts the Strength Coach Roundtable podcast on this very network. He's written a second edition of his book, Rowing Stronger. It's been hugely popular since he first published it, and he's got a special offer for our listeners. You can all get a free download of the first chapter by going to rowing.chat/sponsors and click on the link for the Rowing Stronger book. And lastly, Marlene and I have a new project coming up. We can't tell you details, but we're very open for you speculating as to what on earth we might be doing. We've set up a website. It is fastermastersrowing.com. At the moment, it's just a landing page with a lovely picture of me rowing at the World Masters Games. I'm the one with the pink hair in the bow seat. But it has a little registration form there where if you are kind enough to share your email address with us, we will send you information as soon as it's ready and public. Now, on with the show. Marlene, we're at the transition of the year, aren't we? We're coming up to April. The head racing season is nearly over. What's happening in your world for the month of April?
Well, I'm getting ready. I'm here in the eastern townships of Quebec, and we have at least 1 meter of ice on our lake still. So it's going to be a little while before we get on the water. But I'm getting ready in a couple of days to head down to Florida. I'll be at Florida Rowing Center for the month of April, and I'm doing 4 weekend camps. We call these Royle Row weekends, and these camps are open to everybody, but they're weekends where a lot of the athletes who I do training programs for and that I work with personally, a lot of them come and we get together and we row we have the whole staff down at the rowing center, but it's a chance to get together once a year and have a camp. So I'm thinking about camp topics. I'm thinking about people transitioning on the water on the East Coast for sure. We're all in this, and the Canadians, we're all in flux in terms of getting on the water. But for the people down south, it's in the South in the US, it is racing season, and there are quite a few 1K races in the spring. So for those people, we're already in race mode. So, thinking about competitive pieces, and, that's balanced with, the people up in Ontario who they're going to have to wait until May, like me here in Quebec. They'll have to wait till May to get on the water. But I think everybody's feeling positive that winter is winding down and the sun is coming out and you can hear the snow melting. But So it's the transition, and I think it's a camp, regardless of where you go. There are a lot of nice options for camps. It's a great way to make a transition into your on-water season, because when you get to camp, basically you're going to row the way you rowed when you came off the water. You're going to row like your last stroke. And remember, every day you go back on the water, you row like you rowed your last stroke. So keep that in mind. So it's a fun time. People are ready to get going, ease themselves back into the transition.
Yeah, and a quick reminder that if you are on the water and you're training, and obviously you're moving toward the focus of side-by-side racing, it can be really helpful to train alongside another crew. And by that, I mean literally side by side with another crew, because it helps you begin to practice steering. You get used to the noise of another crew. Maybe they're calling different things at different times, and it helps you to focus in your own boat. So just a little reminder, you might be able to manage that once or twice in your training week.
Exactly. And I think also rowing side by side, especially if you're in a straight boat, training your peripheral vision so that you're aware of where boats are, if they're close to you and side by side. So you're aware of boats as much as possible without having to turn a lot to look outside of the boat. It's very good to practice steering off a stern point if you have landmarks that you can use. So competitive practices sort of raise the level of attention versus when you're out there, oh, we're just doing pieces, or you're doing pieces by yourself. You have a whole different layer of attention when you're doing a competitive practice. And now is a great time for people who are getting into their racing season or starting to think about their early season races. Start pulling your friends together and boats together, and make it a regular thing on Saturdays.
Brilliant. Now I want to move on to our first topic today, which is about language in coaching. A lot of you have listened to myself and Marlene for quite a long time, and you may not realize, but we spend a lot of planning and preparation time talking about language and being very careful with the words that we choose. And in coaching and in rowing, and a lot of you will be instructing your crew, maybe sitting in the bow seat, or maybe you have a coxswain and they talk to the stern pair and you're aide. Being really specific about what you say is important. As an example, I work occasionally with a less experienced coach, and we were out together and they said something, they said a lot. And then they got frustrated that the crew hadn't done what they thought they had told the crew to do. And I was noticing the words they'd chosen and realizing that they had given them 2 or even 3 different options. Remember to, and I'm making this up now, roll forward carefully and square early, and be careful with your placement so you don't bum shove. Now, if you're a crew and you hear those string of things, the chances of you all, whether it's a 2-man crew or 1-man crew or an 8, the chances of you all choosing the same one as your focus point are very, very slim. And simplifying language and making your instructions shorter and with a very clear end point, I find can be very helpful. So, for example, you might want to say, roll forward with care, next stroke, go, and then shut up. And give the crew several strokes to try and effect what you're teaching them to do. Marlene, tell me your favorite language tips.
Well, first of all, I think an athlete will do exactly what you ask them to do, which is precisely why you have to be very careful about your language. And you, as the coach, you have to understand what you want the athlete to do, but not just what you want to see, but how you want the athlete to do it. I know one of the things that I experienced when I was rowing competitively was I often felt like coaches were telling me what they wanted to see, but they were not necessarily offering how to get there. Okay, how do we cross the gap between what I'm doing in the boat and what you want to see? Okay, how do I do that? And I think that was one of the areas where I had to spend a lot of time. And at this point in my career, I was rowing competitively, but I was also a full-time coach at Craftsbury, and when I was back into my second competitive career. So I actually had the combination of the two experiences. And the coach I was working with would tell me something, and I would go out in the boat and work on it. And with the coach's mind, I would go out and I would rotate through different things. I would experiment. I was in the single, but I would experiment and said, okay, well, that just improved the split. That just made a change in the bounce. That just made more acceleration on the recovery. And I used to experiment with that. And then I would, when he said, yes, that's it, I would be like, okay, well, what did I just do? I kept more pressure through my heels in the last quarter of the drive or something. So I felt as a coach that was important to bring to athletes, to say, all right, this is what we're working on, but this is what I would like you to try to do to get there. And I believe in what I call geographical reference points. I believe that every point of the stroke, there is a reference point, that nothing is warm and fuzzy and vague in the stroke. And I believe that if you're going to have an athlete be able to coach themselves on their own, they need to have those reference points. For example, here's one reference point. Get your body angle until your hands reach the crossover. And then when the hands start to separate, allow the knees to come up. So kind of connecting those 2 points, it's a reference point, and the athlete, when they're out training in the boat, can focus on that. Okay, A has to meet B. And I break the stroke down this way when we're working with people, because I know that when I primarily coach in a camp setting quite a bit, and I know that when someone goes home, they're going to need to practice this on their own. So I think that being very specific, where is your body weight? When you're about to put the blade in the water, where are you? And get the athlete understanding, okay, am I sitting up? Are my lats down? Can I feel where the pins are? Do I know, are my riggers level? Getting them to really tune into these types of specific details will give them reference points. And if certain principles are in place, certain flaws go away because they can't exist in that environment. For example, if somebody is keeping their weight, kept their posture and their weight against the pin, against the oarlocks, as they're putting their blade in the water, they will not overreach. Because if they overreach, their weight falls away from that reference point, and the boat's not going to be as stable. So things like that help people learn and have reference points that they can take home with them to practice. So I believe in reference points, and I believe in not just saying, okay, this is what I want to see, but this is how I would like you to work on it. And if that doesn't work, we'll try it from another angle. And if
I
that doesn't
totally
work, we'll try it from another angle.
I totally support that. We've all done that. I've spent the last 3 weekends teaching a learn to row class, complete beginners, and the reference points that I choose for beginners are always physical, where they have touch involved. So, for example,
Good,
I
yeah.
have them sit at the finish with their blades squared and buried, and then I just say, where is the base of your thumb brushing your lower ribs? So that they can feel if they have touched their lower ribs. Now, there are so many variations. They may or may not be leaning back or sitting upright, but as a beginner, it helps that they can actually feel something, and something that they don't have to look at. Because your description of your geographic reference point is a much more sophisticated one, because it's more about feeling and understanding your proprioception, your body in space at the catch. And that's a step too far for complete beginners.
One thing to develop that is the tactile, the feeling of the handle. And for example, when someone who's just learning how to row, when they put the blade in the water, just feeling, how does the handle feel pressing against the inside of your fingers, and keeping that steady through the drive, so that if they're keeping that steady, that's going to help them be a little bit smoother, have a little bit more flow. So those are good, not to overthink things, but have that type of framework. The theory you can do on land. I think when you come into the boat, you want to keep it practical.
Good stuff. Now, let's flip it over. Pet peeves for coaches. What drives us crazy? So, I can be the coach from hell if you want, and there are certain athlete behaviors that make me quite grumpy. Here's one of them. You're in a speedboat, you're starting off an outing, and some of the group, you say you have a bunch of boats, you're coaching multiple crews, and your ideal as the coach is to coach everyone at least once in the outing, and a couple of athletes just row off into the distance and they never come near the speedboat. And it's so annoying, because I can wash down the entire squad in order to get to that one crew, which is pretty disrespectful. But most outings have an out leg and a back leg, and at the turnaround point, maybe if you're the fastest crew, hold back. So you're near the coach boat, so you get some coaching. What are your top peeves, Marlene?
I'm about language, I think. Since I do work a lot in a camp setting, whether it's at Florida Rowing Center or Craftsbury or a visiting camp, you're working with people who deal with many coaches and are coming from many backgrounds. And one of our challenges is we have to blend perhaps what that athlete understands with what we would like to teach them. And there are things that are obstacles to this. And in terms of language, one of the things that kind of drives me crazy is telling an athlete to reach. And this is such a common phrase, and there is a place for reach. However, the majority of athletes out there are going to interpret reach as stretching your upper body as far as you possibly can to put the blade in the water. But if you're asking them to reach, that's what they're going to do. And I think that is, first of all, it's a linear motion, and people tend to go too far towards the stern of the boat and they lose that stability. Whereas, you have limitations to your length based on your body shape. So I think that this term is a term to be very careful with. When you tell an athlete to stay long, in this athlete's mind, what does that mean? The general interpretation that I see, and remember, these are our pet peeves. So general interpretation that I often see is that if you tell an athlete to stay long, they're going to lay back too far. They're going to swing their shoulders very long into the bow because they're focused on their upper body being long versus focusing on the blade staying as long as it can in the water, which involves pressure. So we do want length, or we can think of it as time on the drive, but it needs to be connected to the length of time in the water, not how far the body goes, because your body can keep going and there's no work happening at the oar. So that's one of mine. Early roll up really bothers me. and I know the rowing world's probably going to kill me for this one, but I strongly believe that you must have your blade prepared. Absolutely. You cannot have a good catch, a good entry if your blade is not prepared. In my world, the blade just needs to be ready to go in when it's time to go in. And I use the term early roll up more as an exercise versus then a goal, because I think if somebody isn't having an issue at the entry, we don't need to spend time on it. There's lots and lots of other things that are going to help this athlete row better, and posture and sequencing. So if somebody takes a private lesson and they're only hearing you need to roll up earlier, I don't think that that's the major thing to help an athlete row better. It is certainly an important component, but that's one of my big ones. I think if I'll say the fourth one as the last one is often in an athlete's mind when they're told to lay back a certain number of degrees, or they'll ask, well, how far should we be laying back? And it's not a function of, again, being long, how far your shoulders go to the bow. It's a function of when do you need to release, and when do you need to change the direction of your hands, and when is it the point where you're no longer propelling the boat and you have to move out of bow. So the layback is part of the swing. It's part of the swing, and you can move where the swing happens in the drive, because if you lay back too far, you don't have enough time to get your hands away and to get your body out of bow on time. So that timing of the layback is very important. You need swing. So I would prefer to address it as swing and momentum versus layback as a goal in itself. So those are my main ones.
We're going to cut it off there, because you and I could talk about this for a long time.
I know. Oh.
Now, last topic for today is camps. At some point during the year, we encourage athletes to go on a camp, either as an opportunity to have some intensive focus on technique, or to get a whole load of training work done, or just to build your squad and enthusiasm. My crew, we do outings at a different boat shed in a different part of the town. It's hardly a camp, but we do a couple of outings, and it's a change of scene. A camp can be hugely beneficial, but you can really multiply the benefit you get by following these simple tips. Marlene, what's your first tip now for getting the most out of a camp?
I think the first tip is to be a student and let yourself experiment and have fun and try things you might not try things. Most important, take notes, write things down. When you're in a video, maybe if you're listening to a doc talk or you're on the water listening to a coach, you don't have the opportunity to write something down. But if you have an iPhone, you can make a quick voice memo. That can be really effective. If there's something like, oh, that was great, I want to capture that. I don't want to forget that. But reviewing at the end of the day or the end of the session notes will help you recall an entire session once you're home, especially if there was a keyword or a phrase that a coach said that you were like, oh, well, that was the aha moment. What every camp is looking to do is to provide you with an aha moment. Okay, I got that. That was something I wasn't getting before. And capturing those key words, I think, are important so that you have that to refer back to.
And I'd add to that it's really useful if you're in a crew boat, that as a crew you agree together what you're writing down at the end of an outing. And then before the next outing, just read out loud what you wrote.
Yeah, that's a great tip, like your secret language in the crew. So,
Driftwood.
yes, driftwood, exactly. For those of you who listened to our last podcast, you'll know what we're talking about. And I think at a camp also, you may be rowing more than you might. If you're rowing 2 sessions or perhaps 3 sessions, you might be rowing in one day as much as you row in a week. I think it's important to stay rested between sessions. Go take a nap, go lie down. And a lot of camps, they are, if you're on site, you might have a yoga class or some other kind of thing, but think about your recovery. Eating is part of your recovery. Think about your recovery, stretch often, stay fresh. You are probably going to be inputting more information than you normally get at home. Even if you have a very, very good coach and a very good coached program, you're on the water for a shorter period of time. So that's why the notes helps. But for your own rowing, just focus on one thing at a time. One thing at a time. And you can move your attention to different things, but say for this 10 minutes I'm going to focus on getting my body angle, or you might focus on that for a whole session, but that really helps you avoid the information overload, which I think is important.
One thing I find helpful, if I have my one thing I'm thinking about and I do my minute or two focusing on my body angle, then I'll often row 10 strokes thinking about nothing.
Mm-hmm. And blend
Am
it
I
in.
doing it? Exactly. Am I actually doing it or not? Just clear your mind.
And I think there's another thing too, that if you're we'll say body angle, if you're working, maybe you say, okay, oh my God, I've got 10 things on my list. We hear this all the time. First, I would reference it as saying, you probably don't really have 10 things on your list. You think you do, but these 5 of these might be connected to one rhythm element. They may be the product of a really fundamental thing. So if you go into your fundamental thing and you correct that, that might actually take care of 5 things on your list. So all flaws are not equal, even if you think you have a very long list. But I think your point is very, very well taken, that anytime you do a drill, practice the drill and don't do it for too long, because the more repetitions you do, the more it can deteriorate. Keep it short and sweet, and then blend it into your continuous rowing. And then go back to it and then blend it into because the purpose of a drill is to improve your rowing. It's not to do the drill for the sake of doing the drill. It's to improve your rowing. So I do think that that's really important too, to always put it in the context of blending it into the whole.
And do ask questions. I think this is particularly important. You have more leisure time during a camp. You don't have to ask questions all the time on the water. Remember, you're sharing the coach with the other athletes, but the coach is available to answer your questions, and use your own language and keep asking until you have something clear in your own mind.
That's why having breakfast together is so nice, or getting together for lunch, because it's exactly that time. You have some downtime to hang out, to talk informally, to ask questions, learn from your fellow campers. I mean, that's also a great source of information. And I think you can learn a lot in video reviews. Even if everybody is really quiet and attentive, there's always a certain level of anxiety in a video review, especially with adults. Adults are professionals. Most of them are quite accomplished people. And here they are in this video review in front of 10 or 15 people on a big screen. So coaches are very aware of this and being constructive, but keeping yourself open-minded and looking for improvement. I think you also learn a lot from listening what the coach says about another person's rowing, and listening to the feedback that other people get. The coach may say something and you're like, oh, I'm working on that. Well, that's a good tip for me too. So, you learn a lot from what the coaches are also saying to other campers as much as what they're saying to you. So I mean, it's really a win-win situation if you open yourself to it.
Yeah, and one of the things I like in that scenario is I look at the video and then I try and see what I think the person might be about to be told by the coach. Can I spot the thing? And often I can't. And then slowing it down and watching it a second or a third time can be really beneficial.
I
Now,
think
after
it's
camp,
yes. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
after camp, when you've got home, you've got a notebook full of notes. How can people continue their learning in their practice?
I think it's valuable if you choose a point. Maybe you come away from camp and you review your notes and you say, okay, I have three things. I think this needs to be addressed first. I'm going to focus on this, and then this, and then this. Make a technical plan. Plan on in Monday's practice. I'm going to work on this for my pieces. On Wednesday's practice, I'm going to work on this. That's one variant. If you can focus on one thing for an entire practice. Some people can't. That's too much to focus on one thing at one time. So I would say you could rotate your focus for a piece. If you have three things you came away with camp that you want to focus on, and you're doing 3 10-minute pieces, for the first piece, make a plan. I'm going to focus on this. For the second piece, I'm going to focus on this. For the third piece, I'm going to focus on this. But if you don't have that reference, it's easy to forget what you worked on in camp. It's great when you can get your video. That's often helpful. And ask a coach to review, to talk on the video, your final video at camp. It's really helpful if the coaches are talking on the video and giving you your pointers on video, so you can go back and listen to that periodically. But I think having a little mini plan, whether it's a couple of weeks or what you want to improve on for your first race, going back and kind of setting a list of topics and when you're going to focus on them, or including a drill.
I think that's all really good stuff. And if you're in a crew, talk amongst yourselves in the crew about the key focus points and what you agree together you're going to take away from the camp.
Exactly.
So we've come to the end of another episode. Marlene, thanks for your time. It's been great. Listeners, please send us topics that you'd like us to talk about. And don't forget, you can pick up this and all the other podcasts on our website, rowing.chat, and we're part of the RowingChat network. By joining the email list, you get notified of all the episodes that are being published. Listen to the other shows, give us your feedback, and please tell your friends. We want more people to know about the work that we're doing. Till next time, goodbye.